That night felt different. I'd still sleep with the lights on. Not a nightlight. Not a lamp on the other side of the room. Every single light in my apartment, blazing from dusk until the sun comes up, because the moment it gets dark and quiet, my brain goes back to that house, that hallway, and that sound. The sound I still can't explain. The one nobody believes me about. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened, and I need you to hear me when I say this. I know how it's going to sound. I know there are going to be moments where you think, I was tired, or drunk, or imagining things. I thought the same thing at the time. That's what makes it worse. Because I wasn't imagining it. It started on a Friday in late October. One of those nights where the air changes and the whole world feels just slightly off, like the volume of everything has been turned down a notch. I was house-sitting for my coworker Dana and her husband. They'd gone to her mother's place about 4 hours away for a long weekend, a family thing, a birthday or an anniversary, I can't remember which. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I needed the money, and they needed someone responsible to watch their dog, water their plants, and make sure their slightly paranoid home alarm system didn't go haywire while they were gone. Dana had walked me through everything that Thursday evening before they left. The alarm code, the Wi-Fi password, where the spare key was kept. She showed me which light in the kitchen flickered sometimes and said to just smack the wall beside it once, hard, and it would stop. She laughed when she said it. Her husband, Marco, stood in the doorway of the living room with his arms crossed and said, "The neighborhood's completely safe, by the way. We've lived here 6 years. Nothing ever happens." I remember thinking that was a strange thing to volunteer. Nobody asked. They left around 7 that evening, and I settled in, made myself comfortable on the couch, found something to watch, and fed their dog, a big, lazy golden retriever named Biscuit, who immediately pressed his entire body against my legs and went to sleep. The house was warm. It smelled like cinnamon candles and laundry detergent. It felt safe. That feeling lasted until about 11:30. I had turned the TV volume down low and was half asleep, when Biscuit suddenly lifted his head. Not in the slow, drowsy way dogs do when they hear a car pass or a neighbor's door close. He lifted it fast, ears forward, body rigid, like a switch had been flipped inside him. His eyes were fixed on the hallway to the left of the living room, the hallway that led to the bedrooms and the back of the house. I watched him for a moment. He didn't move. He didn't bark. He just stared. "What is it, buddy?" I whispered. He didn't look at me. Didn't even flick an ear in my direction. Just kept staring at that dark hallway like he was watching something walk slowly toward us. I told myself it was nothing. A mouse, maybe? Or the house, settling? Old houses make noises. But I picked up my phone anyway, unlocked it, just to have it in my hand. And I sat there in the warm living room, watching Biscuit watch the hallway, for what felt like a very long time. Then I heard it. It was a sound I'd described to you as a knock, but that's not quite right. It was heavier than a knock, more deliberate. 3 times, slow, evenly spaced, like someone was making sure to be heard. And it came from the back bedroom, the one Dana had said was their guest room, the one at the very end of the hall, the one whose door she had specifically mentioned was always kept closed. Biscuit made a sound I had never heard a dog make before or since. Not a bark, not a growl. Something low and broken, somewhere in his throat, like he was trying to decide whether to run or go completely silent. He chose silent. He pressed himself flat against the couch cushions and put his face between his paws. I want to be honest with you. My first thought was not, something is wrong. My first thought was Dana has a cat she forgot to mention and it's knocked something over. Because that's how brains work when they don't want to be scared. They immediately produce the most boring possible explanation and offer it to you like a gift. But I had been in every room of that house. I had seen every room, and there was no cat. I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes on the hallway. I pulled up Dana's number on my phone. I didn't call yet, it was almost midnight. And I still felt embarrassed enough by the idea of being afraid that I wasn't ready to wake someone up over a noise in a house I'd been alone in for 4 hours. Walked to the hallway. I want you to understand what that hallway looked like at midnight with no lights on. There was a window at the far end, above the linen closet, and the faint orange glow from the streetlight outside fell through it in a thin rectangle on the floor. That was the only light. Everything else, the 3 doors on either side, the shadows between them was black, and the guest room door at the end was, as Dana had said, closed. I stood at the entrance to the hallway for a long time, long enough that my eyes adjusted to the dark, long enough that I could see the thin gap at the bottom of the guest room door. There was no light under it. That shouldn't have been notable. It was a guest room with the door closed at midnight, of course, there was no light under it. But for some reason, standing there, that darkness felt dense, like the absence of light was a presence in itself. Like the room on the other side of that door was holding its breath. I went back to the living room. I turned on the hallway light. I texted Dana instead of calling. Hey, sorry to bother you. Did you maybe lock a cat in the guest room? Heard some noises. All fine, just checking. The 3 dots appeared almost immediately, which surprised me given the time. Then they disappeared. No response. I waited 10 minutes. Checked my phone twice. Nothing, I told myself. She had probably seen though. Notification half asleep, and then drifted back off before responding. Totally normal. I took a deep breath, picked up the TV remote, and decided I was going to watch something loud and stupid for the next 2 hours, and then go to sleep in the master bedroom with the door locked. Then the hallway light went out. Not flickered. Not dimmed. Out. Immediate and total darkness in the hallway. I remembered what Dana had said, just smack the wall beside the kitchen light. But this wasn't the kitchen light. This was the hallway. And Dana hadn't mentioned the hallway light flickering at all. I walked to the wall switch and flicked it off and on 3 times. The light came back on the 3rd try. I stood there at the switch with my hand still on it and listened. The house was completely silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Biscuit had not moved from the couch. I looked at the guest room door. It was open, not wide open. Just slightly, maybe 4 or 5 inches, but open in a way it absolutely had not been when I had stood at the end of the hallway 10 minutes earlier. I know what I saw. That door had been closed. And now at WASN single quotes T, I will admit to you that at this point I picked up my phone and called Dana, not texted. Called, it rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called Marco, it rang twice and went to voicemail. I stood in that brightly lit hallway, looking at a door that had opened by itself, and I thought very carefully about my options. I could leave, get my bag, put Biscuit on his leash, and drive to a motel. I could call the police and say a door opened and feel humiliated when they found nothing. Or I could walk to that door, push it fully open, turn the light on, and prove to myself that there was a rational explanation. I walked to the door, I pushed it open with my fingertips, reached around the frame, and found the light switch. The room was empty. Bed, Nightstand, dresser, closet door, closed. Nothing on the floor. Nothing disturbed. The window was shut and locked. I checked. The vent on the wall was the kind that only allows air in, not the kind large enough for anything to crawl through. There was no explanation for the door being open, and there was nothing in the room. But the room smelled wrong. Not bad, exactly. Not like something rotting or dirty. It smelled like outside. Like cold night air and wet leaves and something faintly metallic, the way the air smells right before a storm. Inside a closed room in a sealed house with every window shut. I backed out of that room and left the light on. I went back to the living room, sat beside Biscuit, and called my friend Tyler. He answered on the second ring, bless him, because it was almost 1 in the morning and he still picked up like I'd called at noon on a Sunday. Talk to me, I said, and I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, okay, so, did you check the closet? I had not checked the closet. I want to tell you that I felt stupid. That I laughed, went back, opened the closet, found it full of spare bedding and old board games, and that the rest of the night was peaceful. I want to tell you that I went back to the guest room. The light was still on. I crossed the room to the closet door. Biscuit had followed me this time, which I found both comforting and alarming. Because he'd been pressed flat against the couch cushions 20 minutes ago and now he was right behind my ankle like he'd decided he didn't want to be alone either. I opened the closet, spare blankets, board games, a box of Christmas ornaments, a vacuum cleaner. Nothing. I was so relieved I actually laughed out loud. I turned to look at Biscuit and said, see? Nothing. We're both idiots. Biscuit was not looking at the closet. He was looking at the bait. I turned around. There was an imprint on the bait and the comforter. On the right side of the mattress, a long, depressed shape. The shape of someone sitting, or something resting there, pressing down into the fabric. Not a wrinkle. Not a fold. A clear, unambiguous, body-shaped impression in a bed that had been pristine and perfectly made when I'd looked at it 60 seconds ago. I did not scream. I'm not sure why. I think my body went past fear into something else entirely, something quiet and mechanical. I picked up Biscuit, walked out of that room, walked down the hallway, picked up my bag from the couch, grabbed Biscuit's leash from the hook by the front door, put my shoes on, left. I sat in my car in their driveway with every door locked and every light on inside the car, Biscuit in the back seat, engine running, and I called Tyler back. There was something on the bed, I said. He was quiet for a long moment. I'm coming to get you. You don't have to, I'm already in my car. While I waited, I sat and stared at the front of the house. All the lights I'd left on were still visible. Through the windows, the living room, the hallway, the guest room, the house looked warm and ordinary from the outside. It looked like a house where nothing was wrong. Then the guest room light went off. The light I had left on. The light I had not turned off. The switch I had not touched. It went off the way you'd turn a light off if you lived there. Like someone had just decided it was time to go to sleep. I put the car in reverse and pulled to the end of the driveway. Tyler arrived 40 minutes later. We sat in his car across the street, and I told him everything from the beginning. He looked at the house the whole time I talked. When I finished, he said, "Do you want me to go in and check?" I said no. I said I never wanted anyone to go in there again. We drove to his place, and I slept on his couch with Biscuit on the floor beside me, and I didn't sleep well, but I slept. Dana texted me the next morning at 9:30. Sorry I missed your call. Everything okay? Sleeping a lot? No signal out here? How's Biscuit? I told her Biscuit was fine. I told her I'd had a small scare, but everything was okay. I did not tell her about the door. I did not tell her about the imprint on the bed. I did not tell her about the light. I went back to the house the next afternoon while it was daylight with Tyler beside me. I checked the guest room first. The bed was perfectly made, no imprint, nothing disturbed. The closet was exactly as I'd left it. The light switch worked fine. The window was still locked. I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. Then Tyler called me from the kitchen. His voice was careful and flat in a way that made my stomach drop before he even said the words. "Come look at this," he said. I walked into the kitchen. There was a glass on the counter. Not the glass I had used the night before that was still in the drying rack where I'd left it. This was a different glass. A short, heavy, crystal-cut glass that had been taken from the cabinet over the refrigerator. A cabinet I had not opened once during the entire time I'd been there. It was sitting on the counter beside the sink with a small amount of water still in the bottom of it, like someone had just finished a drink. We left. We didn't touch the glass. We locked the front door and we left. I texted Dana and told her I'd had a family emergency and needed to go home. I told her I was sorry. I left her spare key on the porch railing. She was understanding about it. She sent me a payment for the 2 nights anyway, which I almost didn't accept but eventually did. Because I needed the money, and because nothing I said to her would have made sense. 3 weeks later, Dana came back to work after a long weekend and she looked tired in a way she hadn't looked before, shadows under her eyes. Distracted, quiet. I almost didn't ask. I almost let it go. But I asked. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, in a very measured voice, "You know the guest room?" I said yes. She said, "We keep that door closed because Marco's mother passed away in that room 2 years ago. She came to stay with us while she was sick and she died in there. And ever since then," she stopped, looked down at her desk. "Ever since then, sometimes things are just a little off in that part of the house. We're used to it." She said it the way you'd say you were used to a drafty window or a temperamental water heater. Just a fact of living there. I didn't say anything. I think she could see from my face that I understood exactly what she meant. She gave me a small, tired smile, the kind that says, I know, and went back to her work. I drove home that evening in silence. I sat in my parked car in my apartment building lot for 20 minutes before I could make myself go inside. I kept thinking about that glass of water, about someone at the end of a life, in a guest room in a warm house, getting up one last time to get a glass of water in the kitchen, just wanting one last ordinary thing. And I keep thinking about why the light went off. Because here's what I can't stop coming back to. I left that light on. I left it on deliberately, as I was walking out of the room, because the room scared me and I wanted it bright. And after I had already left the house, after I was sitting in my car in the driveway, it went off, like someone was going to sleep, like someone was saying, "It's all right. You can go. I'm staying here. I'm fine." I don't know if that's more comforting or more disturbing. I go back and forth on it. Some nights it feels like a kind of grace, the idea of someone so settled into a place they loved that they simply stayed. No malice in them, no threat, just presence. A woman who got up one last time for a glass of water and never quite found her way back out of that house. And other nights. In the dark, when the silence gets thick and Biscuit lifts his head and stares at the corner of the room for no reason. I can see on those nights. I think about the imprint on the bed, and I turn every light on, and I wait for morning, and